every month, and we like to do it to really sort of demonstrate our food sense technology. So I'm going to go a little bit quick because we've got lots of slides. There's quite a high technical content to this webinar. In fact, I think it's very high. And we are going to do a couple of demonstrations today. So at the end, we'll be doing a demonstration on a hot chili sauce, and we'll also be doing some ginger shot as well. So something that's always not sometimes aware obvious to people, that FoodSense is actually a multi-analyte platform, that we're not only able to do capsaicin, but we can also do other molecules associated with the spices industries. I think if FoodSense is really about digitization and therefore traceability in the supply chain. So what I mean by that is when you do a test on the FoodSense, you will get a result on your Android phone there and then, which is great, but we'll also automatically save the data to the cloud. So the data is digitized and we have the raw signal, and therefore we can get it back later on because it's all saved up in the same place, and it's saved into a personal account that you guys have, and you can essentially sort of, you lock it behind your password, let's say. So this is the FoodSense that we're talking about. This is our G4 product. I'll go a little bit quicker. Now, I know many of you know us, but I only have about one slide on this, which is we were launched in 2014. This is the EP, that is. And we are ISO 13485, so we do follow some very good quality systems, mostly because we do diagnostics for human health. We do contract development and manufacturing of biosensors. We have facilities in Norway and the UK. And this is the team. Online today, I've got a couple of colleagues. I've got Aftab Alam. He is the CEO of Technando. So if you're in India, you'll probably be aware of Technando, as they represent and distribute the FoodSense in India. And Aftab is extremely technical, so he's also a contributor also to the FoodSense technology. And also we have my colleague Solran online today as well, and she'll be doing a couple of live streaming demos for you in a bit. Just to say that anyone who is a FoodSense Generation 4 customer gets personal online training. So we get online, we work from our labs, and we show you what to do, and you can show us back what you're doing, and we can kind of make sure that you're getting going. We do weekly webinars, So if we have like technical questions that come in from clients and they need a bit more information, then we cover it in a weekly workshops that we have online. And then we also have these monthly webinars as well. So this is part of demonstrating the technology. We do these monthly webinars. And just to say that on the 25th of January 2024, we are going to have another webinar like this one. So as you can see, it's a monthly occurrence, but there's also a weekly occurrence, and there's also personalized support. So this is the FoodSense G4. You will see it in action in a minute. What I want to say about it is, this is G4, so we've definitely had a G0, and then we've G1, G2, and G3. So this is something that's really kind of been maturing now over the years. It's smaller at this point. It's definitely easier to use. It's definitely more accurate. It's cloud enabled, and that becomes really significant for us. It's multi-analyte. And so what I mean by that is we can monitor chilies, ginger, and also something called TAS, which is total antioxidative status. TAS is an indicator of how long a product will have a shelf life. If it's high in antioxidants, then it have a longer shelf life, and it's low in antioxidants, it have a shorter shelf life. The technology, you'll see it in a minute, but as I say, it's kind of smaller and more elegant and actually easier to use these days, and Solran will demonstrate that. But there's little features like you're not trying to put these sensors into a slot. That was always a little bit fiddly. Now you just put them onto the hardware, and the hardware clips close, so that's kind of elegant. You'll also see Solran run a test in a minute on the G4 product, and she'll demonstrate that actually after the test is run, that the data ends up in the cloud. And this is important because this cloud part means that if you're ever having a problem, somebody like ZP can actually look at the data and either correct it or help you, or actually tell you, no, what you're seeing is completely right. And that is a common occurrence. It's very elegant now because we've in going to G4 now, there's an Android app. So every time you want to, if you want to, not that you want to go from chili to ginger to something else, but actually it is easy to do that because we have different QR codes for different tests, and then you can just scan the QR code and go to different tests. But you'll see that in action today, as I say. Now, there will be this is being recorded, and we will send you out a copy of this. But when you do get the copy, you can scan this QR code and you'll be able to see that you can download the app. And then if you scan that, the first thing the app will ask you is, what do you want to run? And you can scan this chilli, and that means that the chilli sensor is essentially, or the chilli application is then loaded on your phone. If for some reason some of you have got sort of a wider spice portfolio for some reason, or you have, then ginger is also there, and as I say, tas is there as well, so you can just flick between the three. So that's kind of, so when you look at this, let's say FoodSense Gen 4, this is not just chili today. We're actually very interested in extending its menu so that it can do more and more. So you'll see a live demo in a minute, but in that live demo, we'll take one of our chili or ginger sensors. We'll do 2 demos today. We'll put it in the FoodSense. You'll see that the app will tell the meter what to do, and the meter will give the data back to the app. You'll also see that, in fact, the data is then uploaded to Julie, but you will get a result there and then on the phone. So Scoville Heat Units there and then on the phone. Great. But what's really cool is, because you get it there on the phone, you've got speed and you've got something called certainty. And what I mean by certainty is there's a big concern in the industry that actually you're sending samples out to third-party labs, and those labs are doing the tests, and you get certificates of analysis back, and people receive them and they go, oh, great, you know, that's good. But actually, really, it's trust that you have there, that you don't really have certainty that, in fact, you know, that result is actually accurate. You believe it is, but you don't have a certainty in it because you didn't do the test yourself. But of course, when you do the test yourself, you can actually have a sense of, I knew what I did, and that was the result. And we can show you the raw signal as well to sort of increase that certainty. So not that I'm not trying to teach everyone, turn everyone into an electrochemist, but just out of interest, the raw signals all go to the cloud, and that'll become, I'll do a case study in a bit where this is really useful, because if there's ever any uncertainty on your side, you can share that data with us and we can actually look at it. And that's what's happening for us at the moment. So we have some clients in India. They're just having had it for 2 months, so I'm able to support them by actually getting their data. And that's where Aftab kicks in, because he's got a strong technical background, so he's able to kind of support them in understanding the cloud system and able to share the data with me. So what's nice about the FoodSense is you get the speed of test, you get the certainty of test because you did it yourself, and you also have a transparency because we can actually see the raw signal, and it then enables you to get support as well. As a side note, for example, I've got a client at the moment in India where they're testing some products, and they've got a certificate of analysis from the HPLC, and it says that the powder, the chili powder they've got, is medium intensity, about 84,000 Scoville Heat Units. But when I look at the data, I'm like, guys, there's a lot of capsaicin in there. I'll explain what this curve means in a bit. You don't have to understand this curve in order to use the device. But all I'm saying is the raw data actually is in the cloud. Aftab gave me access to it. I was able to look at it, and I'm like, there's a lot of molecule in here. There's nothing I can do about this. Your HPLC result says it's medium, but this is literally looking at the molecule directly, and it's like, no, there's a lot more capsaicin molecule in there than your HPLC analysis is telling you. So we will do a chili demo and a ginger demo in a short while, so do hang on. But the nice thing is the same instrument can actually do both of these things. So sort of, if you ever need to expand. And when talking about expansion, I suppose ZP, we're here to talk about FoodSense today. So FoodSense is really doing kind of quality control, immediate test in the sort of food industry, and also the sort of food ingredients industry. But we also have a lot of other sensors. So we're super interested in hearing other analytes that are not currently on the platform that people would like. So we had one the other day about the pungency of mustard oil, and we were able to have a conversation about that in one of our webinars as well. So do tell us about the other things that you'd be interested in getting onto the platform. The problem that we originally set out to solve was that if people wanted to measure the hotness of chili, you could use third-party analytical labs where they would run HPLC. There's panel testing, which I don't think anyone's doing. There's essentially guessing, which is just using the quality manager to try and taste and sort of say it's correct, and then there's food sense and the food sense Gen 4. Problem with HPLC is that it's expensive to do. There's a lot of under testing. So what I mean by under testing is people will actually get some HPLC result, and because it's expensive and time consuming to do, they don't do lots of tests. They only do one test, and then they rely on that for maybe several months. So it's definitely a lot of under testing. The results can be slow to come back. You've got to kind of get the sample, send it off by courier. At some point, it'll get tested in the lab, and then the results get emailed back to you. And I'd also say it's a little bit of what we call a black box. And so what I mean by black box is you don't really know what's going on in that third-party lab. You pay for it. You probably pay quite a lot for it, but you don't really know what's going on. With food sense, it's more than 1/5. It's less than 1/50th of the price. You could get 50 food senses for one HPLC, and they're much lower cost to run. HPLC requires organic solvent and highly trained personnel. The food sensor means that you can do lots of testing. You can get fast results, and it's also a transparent process as well. And what I mean by transparent process is, if we look at HPLC, I mean, if we really look at what's going on in HPLC, the first problem we've got is that if you've got a sample like a chili powder, it's very heterogeneous. I will dig into this in a little bit, but essentially, I mean, throughout that powder, there's different amounts of capsaicin, and it's not homogeneous. It's not a homogeneous sample. So the first problem you have is actually you take one sample from the bag or from the pallet or from the storage, or sorry, from the shipping container, and you send that off for HPLC analysis, where they do an extraction process. They do a dilution because the capsaicin is in quite high concentration, so they then have to dilute it. Then they do an injection onto the HPLC column. Then they get a raw signal, which is, I show it here as a chromatogram. So this is what's coming off the HPLC. And I know many of you are food scientists with a lot of experience, so I know you know this. But then they have to then turn that chromatogram into your Scoville Heat Unit using a calibration curve. And I think the calibration curves are not necessarily done daily. They're possibly done weekly or even possibly done monthly. And HPLC systems are not static systems. The sensitivity on these machines is drifting. And so if you get a test that was done just after the calibration, yeah, I would agree that would be the most accurate. But if you do have a test that was done a week after the system was calibrated, then in fact the sensitivity of the entire equipment has shifted, and the calibration is no longer so valid. So this means that you are paying a lot for something, which is a bit of a black box to you, but I've just tried to kind of lift off some of the layers of what's actually going on there. It's not transparent, so you don't see the raw signal, and you certainly don't understand the accuracy of their calibration. And when you've got processes like this, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 processes going on here. Every time you have a process, there's an error associated with it. These errors can stack up, but you have no sense. I've just said here, right, well, if each process had an average, let's say, error of 5%, by the time you've got 5 processes, you've got an error of 25%, or a range. So you get a result from the HPLC, but that's actually plus or minus 25%. You don't know what that is, because if you actually, if you were to actually try sending a sample to a HPLC lab, and then you sent the same sample to another HPLC lab, and you sent the same sample to another HPLC lab, I can assure you, you're going to get 3 different results. So there's definitely, between different analytical labs, there are 3 different results. If you sent the same sample to the same lab, but on 3 different occasions, and give it a different sample name each time, you'll actually find that you've got 3 different results. You've got to be a little bit, you are paying for the HPLC results, but in fact, the repeatability of test is just not there, because actually it's a lot more manual than people otherwise realize. So when you get these certificates of analysis back, this one's quite nice. I only use it for educational purposes because it shows here that the sample seemed to be a dry chili sample. So that's quite a heterogeneous sample. Most of the hotness is in the placenta, or the ovaries rather, the ovaries of the chilies. It's not evenly distributed. They have run it by HPLC, I can see that, and then they give this score of 11,636 Scoville Heat Units. It's quite mild, but there's no uncertainty indicated. So whenever you do a test, you will have a result plus or minus some range, but that's never the case. So people receive these certificates of analysis and take them as absolute truths when actually there's always an uncertainty, but it's never reported. So in fact, there is actually, the chromatogram is behind this number, and the calibration to turn that chromatogram into a Scoville heat unit is also behind that number, but that kind of transparency is not, you're not aware of, you're not seeing what's actually going on there. You just get the certificate of analysis. Now, this technology was originally developed at the University of Oxford. I don't mean to really labor on what we're doing at ZP here, but we are, this is patent protected, so I can talk about it. But the only reason I bring this up is because in a bit, I will show you data that is coming into our database and people are sharing it with us and I'm able to see it. And so the technique is that's underlying the FoodSense Gen 4 is something called voltammetry. It's an electrochemical technique, and it gives us a very distinct fingerprint. And this fingerprint, we're able to say, okay, well, this peak tells me that it's capsaicin, and it's due to the electrochemical activity of capsaicin. This peak is also due to capsaicin, and again, is linked to the electrochemistry of capsaicin. And then there's a new peak on what we call the second scan, and that's also indicative of capsaicin. Why that's important is whenever you look at the raw, so if you use this system, you will definitely get Scoville heat units, 50,000 Scoville heat units. So you'll be able to make a note of that and you'll be happy. But just know that also you would be able to access this raw data and share it with people like myself or AFTAB or Solrun. And we would actually be able to confirm, yeah, everything's working okay. It's very distinctive, this fingerprint, and you'll see it in some of the later slides. So testing chili powder is one of the most interesting samples that we get. The first thing that we're working on, or not working on, the first thing that that you have to know about capsaicin is that it's not terribly soluble. So the methods that we then train people on, we understand that capsaicin, in fact, in water systems is only soluble to about 500 Scoville heat units. Now, what happens is when people make chili sauces, they put in fats and oils, and this helps to actually solubilize the capsaicin, and that's why you can get hotter. But a lot of the process, or a lot of the support that we give at ZP is to make sure that people are not sampling whilst the capsaicin is still solubilizing. We make sure that people are actually sampling once it's up here. So that's an important thing, that we want to make sure that we know that capsaicin is not terribly soluble. And in fact, we want to make sure that we've reached saturation, let's say, or this plateau by the time you're ready to sample. And that's why you'll see Solrun today mention that if we think you've got a mild chili, let's say chili powder, most chili powders are not that mild, but if it was a mild one, we would tell you to do what's called a 1 in 10 dilution, because we know there's only a certain amount of capsaicin in there. We don't need a large volume to dilute it. That's great. But if it's a hotter chili powder, and I think most chili powders, we actually end up doing a 1 in 100 dilution, we increase that 100 that volume, because we know that the capsaicin is not super soluble in it. So that's why we change volume when it's mild. So for example, if it's a mild chili sauce, we might do 1 in 10. If it's a hot sauce, we might do 1 in 100. And if it's a powder, we most of the time are actually doing 1 in 100. So we have this kind of rule that says if you're 0 to 5,000 Scoville heat units, then we're going to tell you 1 in 10. If you're 5 to 50,000, we might say 1 in 100. If you're 50,000 and above, we might tell you 1,000. But for most of you who are on chili powders, I'm actually going to tell you to do 1 in 100, because we've got a lot of people out there doing that. The nice thing is I can see when they share the data. It's very important I say that when they share the data with me, I can see it, and I can basically see that things are working okay. But if you get stuck, don't worry, contact us. You can share the data with us and we can actually check it. So we're just making sure that everyone is in this good place and not sort of essentially under testing the capsaicin in their products. And as I say, because this system is cloud enabled, even though you get Scoville heat unit on your phone, it's also getting saved to the cloud, where you can look at the raw data in the cloud, or you can also then look at it and share it with us, and we can check it. So I can literally see these peaks and say, I can see that really is giving you an accurate measurement. So when we do support customers, this was a client who was measuring on our system. They were measuring it on on the HPLC, and this is on FoodSense. And then they were getting a difference of, on average, they were getting differences that were sort of between -5% plus 7%. So, there were some differences, but on average, it was actually correlating really well with the HPLC. Chili powders, as I say, are quite what we call heterogeneous, and I'll sort of dig into this a little bit. It's easier to test sources because sources are actually very blended, very homogenized. So the sources are easier, but chili powders are trickier. And it really is inherent, it's coming from the chili itself, that most of the hotness of a chili pepper is actually in the ovaries. I know that you guys are more, we do have a lot of people who think it's in the seeds, but it's actually not in the seeds. Most of the hotness is actually in the ovaries. So the chili pepper itself is intrinsically a hard sample because it's heterogeneous. If you dry the chili, all it really does is drive off the water. And so if the ovary is something like 5,000 Scoville heat units when the chili is kind of fresh and wet, when you take all the water off, it goes to about 50,000 Scoville heat units because you've reduced the volume of water by the volume by about 90%. And that's something that we've kind of looked into. So we're able to follow those kind of processes. Just to talk about heterogeneous samples, and I'll go quite quick. This is a heterogeneous sample. If you take a sample from this sample here, you get nothing. If you take a sample from this sample here, you get nothing. If you take a sample from the sample here, you get 1. And if you take the sample from the sample here, you get 2. The more you blend it, the more homogeneous it becomes. And then when you take a sample, it's more representative. When you make something like a chili sauce, then it's very homogeneous, and you should then, doesn't really matter where you take the sample from because you're always taking the same amount of capsaicin. So chilies are kind of on the left, powders are in the middle, and sauces are off to the far right. This will kick into its significance in a minute because what's called the relative standard deviation, when I'm dealing with a chili, if I sort of randomly sample this sample, I end up with a spread in my data of about 141%. If I'm dealing with a powder and I just sample around in here, I end up with what's called a relative standard deviation of 43%. And if I do a chili sauce, it's much better because every time I sample, I more or less pick up the same capsaicin. I might end up with a relative standard deviation of 13%. The one thing I want to say is nobody talks about this in the industry because it's so expensive to do tests. You do one test by HPLC and that's it. People don't do 2, 3, 4, 5 tests because if they did, they would actually find out that there's a lot more heterogeneity, at least in the chili powders, than they're really expecting. So this is work I actually did in this office. I looked under the microscope, and you can literally see chili powders are heterogeneous. They're not, there's different colors in here, because it's basically, a blended up powder. So they are inherently heterogeneous, these chili powders. So what I'm saying is if you take a sample from one part of the powder, you'll get 1 result. And if I take 5 samples, I'll get 5 samples and actually 5 results. And that's a reflection not on the not on the sort of test. It's actually a true reflection on the sample itself. So strictly speaking, if you've got a pallet of chili powder, for example, you should be testing quite a lot to actually find out what the average hotness is. So sample 5 times, 5 samples go off to the HPLC and you get 5 results back. People don't do that because at least in the Europe and the UK, that's at least $500 to do that testing. You can only do it once the sampling becomes within your own control, something on the food sense. So I will talk about that as one of the case studies. So you get a pallet of chili powder in, you sample in different places. And this is exactly what this person's done here. They got sample 1, they got sample 2, they got sample 3, they got sample 4, and they have sample 5. Again, those should actually go for HPLC, but they can't afford to do that. So they've got the food sense, and actually, so they've tested it 5 times. They get the results immediately on their smart device. So that gives them that. And then I'm actually able to check because I'm supporting them. I'm able to actually check the data and say, okay, that looks good. That looks good. Now they, with time, then they'll get an understanding of this, but I'm just saying that there's a transparency to this system, that it's not just a number on a screen or a number on a certificate. There's actually some raw signal behind here that we can explain, rationalize. And if you look at this, it's exactly what I was showing you from the University of Oxford. So all of this data, all the same. There's a real beauty to it that we keep getting the raw signal and it's all, let's say, repeatable. So then with these different samples, I can see that sample 1 was what I call it, quite low. Sample 4 was quite high, and then sample 2, 3, and 4. Oh, sorry, 2, 3, and 5 here, I should say, are actually in the middle. This is really classical. This is what we call a normal distribution. If I was to plot this out, maybe I should plot it out, it should be like a bell curve. And that means that I know that the mean of that sample, or the average of that sample, is 76,000 approximately Scoville heat units. And I know that's plus or minus 18%. That's the true answer. But the problem with HPLC is you don't get any of that insight. You just get this one number without any consideration of actually the sample is heterogeneous. And the reason you don't know it's heterogeneous is because nobody can afford to do all of the testing. So the food sense has some advantages that it's smaller, it's easier to use, it's more accurate, it's cloud enabled, it's multi-analyte, chili, ginger, and TAS. And more importantly, it allows more tests, and therefore you have a more accurate understanding of the sample rather than just this kind of one-off data sheet. So certificate of analysis. What I'm going to do now is I've got the word demo up here. I'm sorry, I just spoke an awful lot. I'll be quiet. I'll turn my camera off. I'll turn my microphone off. I'll stop sharing, and I'll let my colleague Solran introduce herself and give you a couple of demos. Thanks, Solran.
Hi. So my name is Solran, and I will just run a couple of quick demos for you. So today we will be testing a ginger shot, and we will be testing a chili puree. So it's a bit more chunky, just to give you some variety to the samples that we will test. So I will start with the ginger sample. So when we do test, we need to prepare our samples, and we're using chili pulp buffer and ginger buffer. And this is just to give the same environment for all of the sauces to just have a consistency through the samples, and also and we're also diluting the samples so that we will be in that perfect range where we can detect the amount of molecules. So first off, this ginger shot we will dilute in a 1:10 ratio. So I will add 900 microliters of the ginger buffer. And I'll just adjust the pipettes to 900 microliter, like that. And all right, and then I'll just show you up close. So very see-through solution. And then I will add 100 microliter of the ginger shots. So this is what the ginger shot looks like. I'll just shake it a bit just to make sure that it is as homogeneous as possible. Like Martin was saying, we work with inhomogeneous solutions, so it is tricky to get a representative sample of the solution. That's why we want to mash it up as much as possible and shake it. So just then pipette it into the solution with that. So this, add it to the solution, and then I will, the ginger shot is very homogeneous in itself, and it mixes really quickly, but just to sheet a bit further, I'll just use the vortex real quick, like that, just to make sure that we have mixed it real well. So, all right, and next up, I will show you, now our sample is ready, but now I will show you our device. So this is the device, and here's a phone with the app, and right now it says device connected, but I will just disconnect it for the purpose of showing you. And what you'll see from the device is that it has a blue blinking light, which indicates that it's looking for Bluetooth connection. So I'll click connect the device, and then I will select my device, and it's connected. Right now it has chosen the chili sensor assay because that was what I was working with last, but I will choose the ginger assay. So right now you can see the ginger assay is chosen, and it is important that you have the correct assay because the different assays needs different electrochemistry, or it needs different methods to discover the molecule that we're looking for. In this particular example, we're looking for gingerol. So another perk with this app is that we can go to test settings, and we can test, we can change some samples ID, cluster name, etc., just to make it easier for us when we look through our data later to differentiate between the different samples that we've done. So I'm just going to call this one ginger test and today's date, and add it to the cluster food sense demo. So right now we're ready to test. So I will click go to assay, and it takes me to instructions. Here I have to decide what dilution factor I'm using, and for this sample in particular, we're using a 1:10 ratio. So the screen tells you what to do. So we will insert the sensor, the ginger sensor, and we have these cartridges around the sensor just so that it's easier for us not to touch the electrodes of the sensor. So stay away from the electrodes, do not scratch it, just keep it contained. So we'll just insert the sensor just like that, push the device up so that we have a connection. And then next thing I'll do is to apply sample to the sensor. So I will apply 50 microliters of the sample that I already prepared. And that is a perfect amount for covering all the electrodes of the sensor. So we want to cover the working electrode, the reference electrode, and the counter electrode. So I'm pipetting 50 microliter onto the electrodes, just like that. Just like this. And what's also very convenient with this device is that it's designed so that if you, in case you spill, it won't go into the device, and it's easy to clean. Okay, so now I will click start measurements. And now you can see an indication bar circle and percentage, and it's just running through the assay. And what it's doing is running through something called cyclic voltammetry, and it's creating this voltammogram that we will look at in Julie, our data on cloud data processing or management system later. But it just indicates where it's in the process. And now it finishes, and it says upload complete, which means that the results have uploaded to Julie. So what we will do then is we will go to Julie. I just have to sign into my account. That. And yeah, like that. And then it's up here, ginger tests, the newest one that we did. So the first curve we can see is the first curve of the sample. So it's running through two curves, and you can see oxidation and reduction peak. The second time it's coming around, it's going through two oxidation peaks and a reduction peak, and we're analyzing the reduction peak to assess just how much gingerol we have in our sample. So what we will do now is to test chilies. So first off, again, we need to prepare our sample. So this is a chili puree. Again, I will shake it just in order for me to be able to have as much of a homogeneous solution as possible. And I'll just pour some into a weigh shed, just like this, just so that's easier for me to pipette it out of the bottle, just like that. And then I can show it in the focus screen, actually, like that. And I will add 50 microliter of the sample to then 4 milliliter and 950 50 microliters of sample, which then gives us a 1:100 mixture ratio. Okay, so now we're using a chili pop buffer, and this chili pop buffer also creates the perfect environment in regards to salt concentrations and pH and so forth for our sample, for the most convenient detection of our sample. So now I will add 50 microliters of the sample. Be aware that it's a bit chunky. So just like that. And then I will add this sample. Okay, let me show you in the other camera. Just like that. I will add it into a sample just like this. And that. And what you can see now is that it's falling to the bottom, not like the ginger sample, which just automatically mixed well into the solution. But I'll just shake it, and again, I will use the Vortex just to mix it real quick, just to cheat a bit. Okay, so now that my sample is ready, what I will do next is I will start preparing the device and the cartridge. So now you can see that the sample looks fairly homogeneous. As I said, this was a chunky sample, so it has some bits and pieces in there, but that's all right. We'll just pipette from the solution anyways, and sort of, yeah, pipette from the middle of it. And in case there are some chunks and bits on the sensor, that's all right. The capsaicin itself, the pungent molecule of the chili sample, is being extracted into the buffer phase. So let's look at this. So what we will do is we'll dispose of the sensor that we tested with ginger. And also an important fact about these sensors is that they are a one-time use sensor, and that's because the capsaicin does like the surface of the electrodes a lot. So if you would test it over and over, you would carry on capsaicin from your last experiment into the next. So that's why we need clean new sensors. So now we've inserted a new sensor, and right now it's chosen the ginger sensor assay. So we'll click this item, and yeah, we will scan the QR code. It's pretty fast, but we'll scan the QR code of the chili sensor. So now we have the chili sensor assay chosen for us. I'll quickly go into the test details and just change the name to chili, just to differentiate between the two of them, just like that. And then I'll go to assay. The dilution factor this time is 1:100. So I will click choose the 100 one, and then it instructs you what to do next. So I'll place and lock the cartridge. I'll mix the sample. So next up is to apply the sample to sensor. So again, I will apply 50 microliters of the sample. Oh, I will actually show you how I pipette. So just like that, just go into the solution in the middle of the solution, and I pipette. So now I will apply it onto the electrodes of the sensor, just like that, and be careful not to scratch the electrodes. And then I will click Start Measurements. So now we have the indication bar running. So 23%. And we just have to wait for it to get through those 2 cyclic voltammograms. And also, it's also, in addition to running through the cyclic voltammograms, it's also sending the data to Julie and analyzing the data for us. So here you can see the results screen is coming up. It gives us a short summary of the molarity or the ppm or the Scoville Heat Units, depending on what unit you prefer. So this sample in particular was 10,000 Scoville Heat Units, and it also says upload complete, which indicates that it's been uploaded to Julie. So let's quickly go into Julie and look at our chilli results. So I'll into Julie. Just refresh the page, just so that it's loading the chilli report. Yeah, okay, so my internet, yeah, no, okay, so my chilli test has been uploaded into Julie, and you can see the first screen or the first voltammogram of the chilli assay, and here you can see the oxidation peaks and the reduction peaks of the capsaicin. And it's analyzing the peak. And this curve is what it based those results that you could see earlier on the screen here. So what's very good with this system is that you have the raw data to back up those results, and you can see where it's going wrong or if you have interferences and so forth. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was just struggling to get to click the buttons then. So yeah, I just want to do a quick thank you to Solrun. It's actually quite interesting because Solrun was able to show you that for your kind of, let's say, you know, your people on production or, you know, your sort of technicians, they can get this result there and then on the phone. But then for the senior guys or people who really want to kind of, you know, validate that that was a good result, they can literally go then in and see that data, you know. So it makes it interesting to me, see, because when you get those HPLC results, you really don't have any transparency on what happened. And also, I kind of like the fact that when Solron was doing it, see, there's a custodialship on the sample. What I mean by that is she took the sample, she diluted it, she then vortexed it, then she tested it, and she got the results. So she knows exactly what happened. Honestly, when you get a strange result that comes back on a certificate of analysis by a third-party lab, you have no idea what was going on there. You just have to take it at faith. So we are here to help. We can definitely help you on the food sense generation 4. Why? Because actually you get the result, you're happy enough, but actually if there's a problem, we can dig into it and see it ourselves. If you've got other applications, we'd be super interested to hear about them. And there's one of the questions that's just come up here is what is the Scoville Heat SHU range of testing? Theoretically, we can actually go up to 16 million, which is pure capsaicin. Just to say that when we were first validating this kit, we were not testing it on chili powders and stuff like that. We were actually testing it on capsaicin. You know, we did pure capsaicin testing. One of the questions that came in that was quite interesting was, I've been waiting for this question for a while. Can we work with LIM systems? This is laboratory information management systems. So LIM systems are important because we're here to talk about digitization and traceability, and a LIM system really is the heart of that. So the quick answer is that we can integrate with a LIM system. So that, I think that is important because obviously if the data is in our cloud, we have something called an API, an application program interface. So that means that your LIM system can make a call on our database and get the signal across. So if I was to summarize it, in my career, I'm definitely, you know, a big proponent of HPLC. I used to work in the pharmaceutical industry. We used it quite a bit. But in the pharmaceutical industry, our samples were actually quite homogeneous. So, but in fact, in your world, they're heterogeneous. So when you get these certificates of analysis, you don't get them so super frequently because they're quite expensive to run. And there's never any indication of error, and there's no custodianship of the data. You've kind of lost that kind of control. But I did like the fact that Solrun was able to take you from sample all the way through to cloud data today. So you really got a sense of, we could follow the data all the way through. And I also like the fact is I'm not trying to turn anyone into an electrochemist. But I am showing you that, in fact, we can support those numbers through the raw data. Whereas, if you've got a certificate of analysis, you have no idea on the chromatogram, you have no idea when the calibration took place, you've no idea that maybe an error was made in the lab that you weren't there because it wasn't your guys who ran it. So I think with that, I'll just have a quick look to see if there's any questions in the Q&A. I'll check in the chat as well, make sure there's no questions. So I can see that Aftab's put his contact details. So if you happen to be in India, I know we've got people from all around the world today. If you happen to be in India, though, there's info@technanda.com is Aftab has put his email into the chat there. Otherwise, I want to thank you for attending today. A special thank you to Aftab from Technanda, who's done a lot of organizing of this and also a lot of support of the customers that we currently have in India. Special thank you to Solrun as well for doing those 2 demos. And I'm sorry about your internet connection today, Solrun. I could see that it wasn't the world's best, but you did well. And thank you all to you for attending, because I appreciate you've given us, 45 minutes of basically what's valuable time. So we do appreciate it. If you've got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Okay. Thanks so much. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.